People who are looking to buy a business are seeking information all over the place. Okay, some of it's good, some of it's bad, but the best place to get information is from people who have bought a business and bought a business recently. In this video, we are going to have a panel discussion with two Acquisition Lab members run by my co-founder, Chelsea Wood. My name is Walker Dybel. I'm the Wall Street Journal bestselling author of Buy Then Build, creator of the Acquisition Lab. Check out Chelsea Wood interviewing these two lab members as they explore buying small, buying big, when to buy a next business, and all kinds of other aspects of buying a small company. Check it out.
My name is Will Smith. I'm the host of the podcast Acquiring Minds. And today's session is with Chelsea Wood, co-founder and managing director of Acquisition Lab. We usually call these sessions with Chelsea office hours, but today we're doing something different. A live panel, as you heard, with a couple closers. Closers being the name in the Acquisition Lab of members who got over the finish line in their search and actually bought a business. As you probably know, the lab is a cohort-based education community for people serious about buying a business. Many successful grads of the lab have appeared on Acquiring Minds. Chelsea, take it away.
Thank you for dialing into the office hours. Anyone that's attended any of my previous ones will know that I try really hard to make them practical and tangible and things that will help you actually execute on your search. And so when Will and I were talking about content for my next office hours, we kind of played with the idea of like having lab members share their experiences, because you can hear from me all day long. But some of the questions you guys have, I have people that have been exactly where, you're hoping to go and have had answers, right, that they want to share with other searchers about the questions that you have. And so I originally, when I started this kind of concept in my head, I was thinking it would be really helpful if our lab members could talk about what skills they think are really important for a business owner to have, so that people that are thinking about doing this can figure out if they should. But then in talking with lab members, other stories came out that I was like, oh, well, people would really love to hear that part. So I'll ask for some grace, as the way that this session is functioning is a little bit different than the way I've done it in the past. But I think it's really important that you hear from people that have done it, right? And so the agenda for today is going to be, I want to talk a little bit about why I co-founded the lab, so that anyone that's not familiar with the lab will understand a little bit about us and how it's relevant to the talks that we're about to give. But the live lessons from the lab that I want to go through is we're going to talk to David Bregman about trying to decide if you should buy big or start small, some lessons that other lab members have come up with. And then the last piece is some people that have also closed that couldn't be here today, including the third story I'm going to share with you guys, had some things that they wanted to share that are lessons from them and that they wanted to share with other people that are searching. And so I'm going to share those, and then just my thoughts around critical success factors. And so the first thing that I want to talk about is why I, quote unquote, threw my career away to build the lab with Walker. And so anyone that's familiar with the Buy Then Build book, that's my business partner is the one that wrote that book. And the reason why I was so comfortable, I mean, I wasn't comfortable. I said no like 11 times, but my husband eventually convinced me to try it. The reason I was so comfortable doing it is because, so my background is I'm an industrial organizational psychologist who did a lot of cleanup work. And I've been in transactions since 2011. And so often people didn't pay enough attention to who they were and what they were buying to figure out if that made a match at all. And Walker's book, if you've read it, really focuses on anchoring in who you are and what you should be buying. And that's the only reason I was so comfortable partnering with him, right? Is because I truly, in my heart of hearts, think that's the difference between doing this well and just doing it. I could not have a slide deck without memes, because you guys message me all the time about my memes. And so here's the three that I could fit in, knowing that I'm not giving you a bunch of content. So the first thing is I want to talk about how there's currently kind of this trend on SMB Twitter about how everybody should be buying at least $1 million in EBITDA. And so the first talk is with David. He's going to talk a little bit about how he pivoted from wanting to buy really big to deciding, maybe I want to start small. There's no right answer, right? It's just figuring out what's right for you. And then I stole this from Michael Girdley, who posted it because of Holdco. Then the second topic is I feel like Holdco And this whole idea of like buying a bunch of businesses is another big trend on S&B Twitter. S&B Twitter is like the bane of my existence sometimes, if I'm honest. But I brought Brian here, who bought a company and now he's growing through acquisition, to talk a little bit about what that means, right? Holdcos, roll-ups, like they're all words for buying a bunch of companies. And it is a really good strategy if it's done well, but it's also a really bad strategy. And so for anyone that wants to hear, because Walker talks about buying a bunch of companies in his book, right? There's a video on our YouTube channel called My $16.5 million Mistake. You should watch that video because he basically says he shouldn't have bought a bunch of companies. And so the last one that I'm going to talk to you about, I'm going to tell this member's story because they had a conflict, is over and over and over again. I talk to people that want to buy companies because they want more autonomy, right? They want more freedom and decision making and impact. And honestly, there's a pivot happening, myself included, where we're valuing time with our children and we're wanting to spend time with our children. And that means that we have to stop working 16, 17-hour days for someone else. And so I'm going to share a little bit about that story, about kind of that aspect. And so the first person is going, I'm going to kind of, David and I are going to talk. I'll ask some questions. He'll give some answers. And then we will talk a little bit about his adventure and then Brian's. David, if it's okay, can you just kind of introduce yourself, give them a little bit of a background on who you are and why you decided to buy a business in the first place?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks for having me, first of all, Chelsea. Hi, everybody. So David Bregman, I live in Southern California, and I kind of came to this journey, as perhaps many of you are. Back in July, I found myself as part of a layoff of my company. I was in tech for probably 30 years and had planned to stay there until I retired. And those plans changed, not because of anything I did. And so after that happened, I kind of took a look at where I was and what I wanted to do, and decided for me, going back into tech at this time is not what I wanted to do. Two of my peers who were laid off at the same time are still looking for roles this far on. And so I decided I needed to do something different. And I kind of started playing around with the idea of buying a business. I had started a business back many, many years ago, 30 years ago, and thought, maybe it's something I should look at again. And I didn't want to start because I knew that was not the right place. And just like you, I ended up on a webinar like this, met Chelsea and heard what she had to say. And I said, well, that's pretty cool. And watched some of Walker's videos and started reading the book. And decided, yeah, this is the path I want to go on. And ultimately decided that for me, after doing a lot of research, the lab was something that made a lot of sense and was a good way to jumpstart my journey.
Aw. Okay, so talk a little bit about what your original, what were you thinking you needed to buy?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So one of the things I think that's super important for everybody on this call to do who's thinking about this is something that I did early on, is look at realistically, what do you need at the end of the day to live? How much money do you need to be taking home to live? Now, there's a need and a want difference, right? So I looked at really what the need was, and then I looked at what the want was, and there's obviously a gap there, right? You want a lot more than you need. And so initially, when I put together my buyer's profile, I was looking for a company that had somewhere between 3 and 500,000 SDE, or seller's discretionary income, which really equated to a company that was, anywhere from a gross revenue of probably, 2 million to 3 or 4 million, and even looking upwards of $1 million in SDE, and thought that's where I wanted to be, and kind of that was my target area.
Now, walk me through how that evolved over time, right? And so
Yeah.
I know you had other deals because, well, we talked about them, but how did that journey kind of evolve over time, right? Where you started thinking you wanted one thing and then you decided something else.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is important is I wasn't looking for any particular type of business. My criteria was pretty wide. I just didn't want anything that was retail or food or beverage. That was kind of my exclusion. But I was open to services, business to business, a bunch of different areas. And I looked at I probably looked at 150 businesses. I looked deeply at probably 30 or 40, and actually met with the owners of probably a dozen plus. And as I went through that process, I came down to really two businesses. This one that I bought, which we'll probably talk about in a second, and then another one that was a lot larger. It was about a $4 million acquisition with a $1 million SDE. And that's kind of, and I actually put LOIs in on that one first. And then this one came up and they wanted some negotiation. And I really decided, for me, it was more important to de-risk things. I was at a point in my life where I wanted to buy a business and I wanted to buy a successful business that would grow, but I didn't want to bet the farm on it, right? I wanted to be in a situation that if things didn't go well, okay, I could weather the storm. I didn't want to have a $500,000 a year loan from the SBA that I had to service and deal with that stress and that hassle. And so that's kind of was the tipping point for me in talking with my wife about, okay, I've got this here. Yeah, the upside is really, really good, but the risk is also really high. Here, the upside's lower, but the risk is even lower. So that's ultimately what made me make my decision and change from a much bigger to a much more reasonably sized business.
I think what you're sharing is really interesting because I get, and as you can imagine, I talk to a million people a day. But I talk to people all the time that are thinking about doing this. And I was just on a call yesterday and she's like, so are you telling me I should buy bigger? I'm like, I am telling you nothing, right? It's a very personal choice. There is not a right path. And so you can go big, you can go small, but at the end of the day, you have to sleep at night with your head on your pillow. And if going to bed every night carrying a $2 million loan to the government is going to make you have a heart attack, I promise you, the freedom is not worth it. Right? Because you're
100%.
going
Yeah.
to feel like you're free in a prison. So, like, maybe the trade-offs aren't so good. Okay, perfect. And so let's talk about the business you bought, right? Because I'm super excited for you because it's a great fit for you. And so what did you buy?
Yeah, so as I said, I was looking across the board. I looked at one business that was hearing testing for kids in industry. I looked at another one that was a software company. I looked at a CNC machine shop. So, I mean, we're talking, you couldn't look at totally different businesses. Ultimately, this business that I bought is 3 podcast studios. So it's Third Wheel Podcast Studio. We have 2 in LA and 1 in Seattle. This is the one in Hollywood. There it is. And it's actually really cool, as it turns out, and it fits with my background because I was in radio and television back early in my career. And I kind of just came back there, not by, again, saying, oh, I need to find a business that fits this skill set. It's just, oh, wow, this is a business that makes sense financially. And oh, also, I know this and I enjoy it. And a funny aside, I was talking to an old college friend the other day on the phone, and she said, you're the happiest I've heard you in years. And it was kind of like just interesting to hear that because, yeah, it's a lot of work. And look, it is, you talked about autonomy. Yeah, you get more autonomy, but it's also you're working all the time. And just I want to make no bones about that. You are, the buck stops with you. So when a customer's not happy, they're going to you. When an employee has an issue, they're going to you. When something breaks, they're going to you. But you also are benefiting from all that. And so that to me makes it worthwhile and much more enjoyable than when I was working in tech and working for someone else.
And so what advice would you give others as they're thinking about, like, should I buy $1 million of EBITDA or this, $400,000 SDE business?
Really look at it, and this is something I really appreciated about the lab and the early aspects of it is that self-discovery and really taking a look in the mirror and understanding your risk level, and again, that need versus want, but also where your skills lie and how much you're willing to invest in it personally, emotionally, work-wise, because again, it is work. And hey, had I bought the business with $1 million EBITDA, maybe it would have been the same amount of work. I think it would have been a lot more work, but again, with much more risk. And to your point about, every night I'd probably be thinking, oh, I've got this loan payment to make and this and that. Whereas now I bought a business that if I was in a fortunate position, I could buy for cash, made the closing that much easier. And so I'm now knowing, and of course, because I bought an existing business, and my wife was shocked by this, like it's cash flow positive from day one. Day one, actually, a quick story. I signed up for Square because we take credit card payments up front. The third day in, Square sent me a note saying, we're pausing any payments to you because we're concerned about fraud. We need to verify the level of activity because it was a brand new account. And they're like not used to that. And so the fact is that I could step in day one and already I'm on track to do 20% more revenue than they did last year just by making incremental changes and bringing what I have to bring to the table. I think that that's, really what you need to look at is what impact can you have, and how comfortable do you feel with that level of risk versus, $1 million versus 400,000 versus whatever?
I know I'm not your mother, but I am sitting here having such a proud little mom moment. Like,
Hey,
I
and
don't get to listen to my lab members talk that much, and no one knows kind of the process, but I literally just posted in Slack and said like, hey, who has lessons they want to share? And so I don't get to, talk one-on-one with our lab members this much after closing. And for you to come on and say like, am I allowed to say that the lab helped me? And I'm like, sure, if it helped. But I'm just so proud of you, and I'm so happy for you because this is a great fit for you. If you had to pick three things that you think that most most business owners need to understand or have skills around, what would be like one or two things that you think they need to have skills around?
yeah, so definitely multitasking, although some people say there is no such thing, task switching, that's going to be a paramount because especially for me, it's interesting, coming from the corporate world as a lot of you are, you're kind of used to, okay, I have a Zoom meeting at 9 a.m. and I've got one at 11:30 and one at noon. I get a call on the phone from somebody, a potential customer. I have to just be ready to deal with it and be interrupt driven. Or yesterday I was in the middle of something and a customer called and they had an issue that I had to solve right away. So be able to make that task switch very rapidly and deal with that and manage that because, again, as I said, the buck stops with you. And so you're going to have to manage all that. Even if you have a great manager and a great team, ultimately it's going to flow up to you. That real self-discovery, knowing where your strengths lie and knowing where they aren't so that hey, I really suck at accounting. Well, then you probably have to budget and plan for bringing in an accountant. I'm really not good at sales. Okay, you have to bring in somebody to do your sales. So look at where your strengths lie and where they don't, and make sure that you can fill that gap and that you budget for that, right? I think a lot of people coming in say, oh, okay, well, look at this has a great SDE, and they don't realize it was a husband and wife, and she was doing all the accounting, and he was doing the sales, and she was doing HR and payroll. And now you're coming in and you have to do all of those tasks yourself or hire somebody, and that cuts into your profit. So those are kind of the key things I think you need to look at when you're coming into it.
Love that. All right. So for the sake of time, I'm going to move over to Brian and let Brian kind of share his experience. And so Brian, can you introduce yourself a little bit, give a brief background, and then, why you chose to buy a business?
Yeah. Hey, Chelsea, thanks for having me on. I know it's been a couple years since you and I have spent time together, so we got a lot to catch up on. Hopefully we can do it in my short amount of time I have. So I guess I've just always had the entrepreneurial itch, and I try to satisfy it in a lot of different ways. And that's when you and I met each other. I think it was 3.5 years ago, cohort 11.
Oh my God, I didn't realize it was that early. We're
Yeah.
on cohort 54 for perspective.
Yeah, I ran across somebody the other day that was like cohort 51. I was like, well, I need to email Chelsea and let her know what's going on. So yeah, cohort 11. I don't know where I even heard about Acquisition Lab, but I was a big listener of the Acquiring Minds podcast as well. So maybe an advertisement there, and I just reached out to you. So why I decided to buy a business, I had grown 2 businesses significantly for somebody else, one of which I watched have a pretty successful exit. The other was in corporate America. And I told my wife, I told my family, I said, next time I do this, I'm gonna do it for myself. I don't know how I'm gonna do it. And then I, as a lot of us do, I was doing some real estate and listening to Bigger Pockets. And then I transitioned. That was just the gateway drug to get to the Acquiring Minds podcast and a few others. And I said, you know what? I don't know anything about fixing houses, but I do know a lot about managing people and running a business and putting people in the right place. And I said, this might be the right thing for me. So that's when I found you guys, and that was the first part of the discovery. And then we I got lucky. I wound up buying a business in an industry that I've been in since I was 22 years old. So at 36, when I bought it, I had plenty of experience, and not only that, but plenty of contacts within the industry that were willing to come work for me and help me out.
No, I love that. So tell us, what business did you buy?
So it's a tree service business. Northside Tree Professionals in Atlanta, Georgia is what I bought, and closed in November of 2022, which I guess it took me, for lab members, is probably short, but I think I closed about 6 months after you and I stopped working together, Chelsea.
Yeah, I
So,
just realized you both closed really fast, and so I don't want people to have an unrealistic expectation. It's about 8 to 10 months on average.
Well,
collaborators. Like you
yeah.
guys were just superstars, which I love.
I can also tell you that from being somebody who's continuing to acquire businesses, that the world of acquiring is just a little bit more difficult nowadays than what it was when I bought my business. So it's no discouragement. I also got lucky. I mean, in our lab, I think we talked about doing like 10 or 20 LOIs till we found one that we want. I put in one LOI and that was it. So it wasn't easy. I mean, the due diligence process was tough. Had an owner that wasn't great to work with that was exiting, which actually wound up being a benefit to me because the employees were happy to see a new face in. But nothing was easy about that process. But once it was done, it was a great acquisition.
Can you won't know what I'm about to say, but can I share something that you said right while we were in the practice mode? Because I think
Sure.
it will resonate with people watching. So you said, thank you for I'm paraphrasing. You said, thank you for giving a tree guy like me a chance in the lab with a bunch of like Harvard grads or something like that.
Yeah. I was the guy who stayed silent in the corner and just soaked up all the information because everybody else was talking way above my head. So
No, but I think there's so many people that think that they have to have an MBA, and we do have a lot of Harvard grads and like top tier schools as lab members, but it's not required, right? We have a lot that aren't,
yeah.
those high level that do this beautifully well, and you have one of the best backgrounds, right? Because you did this for someone else, so why not do it for yourself? And so I share that because I think there's a lot of shared sentiment there with
Yeah.
searchers of like, I don't have an MBA or I haven't founded a company before. It's important that you have transferable skills, which we'll talk about later, but like, I don't know. I just wanted to call that out because I think you've done amazing, but I'm sure there's others in the lab that feel the same way you feel.
I also think that with like your person who's all excited to buy a business, they got a finance background, finance MBA. Like I think they've got a lot easier path to doing the actual purchasing of the business because all these terms and everything that we use are come as second nature to them. I really think once you get plugged in day one as the owner, the person who has more boots on the ground management experience is going to be the person who's better off short term. I think anybody can succeed long term, but short term, I think it's better to have the management experience when you're jumping into a company that's probably not as big as what you're used to working. And I don't know,
And that's something that I'll talk about at the end. I 100% agree with you. Like it's a lot of learning curves to stack on top of each other if you've never managed a group before and now you've never owned a business and you've never been in that industry and you've never led and it's like, wow, wait,
yeah.
that's a lot of not knowing at once.
Especially white collar people jumping into blue collar businesses too. It takes, you got to talk a little different, manage a little different, and our people. I mean, all we are is basically a labor arbitrage business. So our people are the most important thing. So making them feel that way after you get in there, and not making them feel like they're just bringing in dollars is super important.
No, I love that. Can you take us back to like the first 90 days of owning your business? Kind of how would you describe that time to the folks listening?
Yeah, first 90 days I would actually say that the first 90 days wasn't even the hardest part about owning the business for me, but that's just my personal journey. I think it's a lot different for other people because a lot of times you're succeeding an owner that is beloved, which is, I was not. There was a very key manager that I already knew of that was in place here. That was the beloved one who's still with me today. So 90 days isn't going to do you a whole lot of help because through the lab and through listening to some horror stories on acquiring minds, I knew that working capital was super important. So I made sure we had enough working capital in the business. And that wasn't the hard part. Our hard part really came once we came into our peak season about 6 to 9 months down the road. Because our company, I bought it as a $2.5 million revenue company, and we finished my first full year at 5.1 million. And it was profitable, but you wouldn't know it by looking at the bank account because our AR went from 53,000 to 530,000. It's a very CapEx intensive business. So I had to buy a significant amount of much more than I told the bank I was going to buy in CapEx first year. To keep it going. So it was that was the hard part. Was we were growing, the team was so proud of it, and I was sitting in my office pulling my hair out because anybody who's bought a business with an SBA loan and has only owned it for 6 months knows how hard it is to get affordable working capital. So that was the hardest part. We've had hard parts besides that, but definitely first 90 days was great. It was we still had AR 53,000. I didn't have a boss anymore. I was just getting to know the guys, and we have a great group of people here, which I did not know I was inheriting. Got really lucky there, and I wish everybody could get as lucky as I did. So
I love that. So one thing that no one really thinks about, I don't think, I mean, we talk about it in the lab, obviously, but no one understands inherently that once you've closed on a business, you are so over levered in your first year that if you do need growth capital, it's extremely hard to get, which is why we talk about some of the things we talk about in the intensive. But I think that that paired with the fact that working capital typically is underestimated just creates a lot of challenges your first year. So I love that you overcame them. How did you overcome them?
I'd love to tell you all the secrets, but no, I mean, ultimately, I went out and I tried to bring on a bunch of commercial customers, and it just because I had networks in the area, it flew in so quick, and they paid net 60, net 90, whereas the old business was used to receiving cash on completion. So honestly, I just stopped business developing about June. Well, my first 7 months in, I just stopped calling people. And we focused more on the residential side, which is a better cash flow side of the business. And we made it close, but that's to David's point earlier, buying a business where you still have a little bit of extra cash on hand left over, because my wife would be happy to tell you that we have put a lot of more money into the business during that point in time. Luckily, we've been able to take it out recently. But we had to inject a lot of additional working capital.
Well, and I think that's what's so interesting with this whole like buy a business with no money down, have the seller, contribute and I tell people this is why we don't work with those folks, is like buying a business and owning a business can cost money, especially in your first year. And so I love that you are able to take that out, recently. Can we talk a little bit about now what you're doing right now, right? So you're in growth mode. And so have you considered your second deal? I think you're in the process of it, but
We've closed on our second deal. So we bought another company that basically has the same financial makeup that Northside Tree had when I bought it. And we've kissed a lot of frog. Like we've talked to make, now I'm feeling the pain of the search process, because this is probably the 50th company that we've talked to. But we did close last week, and we're very excited about them joining us. They closed last Wednesday. So if anybody's in Dallas, Texas, I need some friends out there. Send me a message. So
we have a huge base of lab members
yeah.
in Dallas, actually. So
I'll be out there a couple times a month. The nice part with that deal is that the owner's staying on and is enrolled some equity, and so we're excited about. Really great person that we're working with out there. So now I just got to get in growth mode. And now we're managing, I think we went from 45 to close to 70 employees overnight. So
that's wonderful.
Getting out there to meet the team. I've already been introduced. So but yeah, that was a fun process, to say the least.
So how did you know it was time?
Last year, Hurricane Helene hit the East Coast, right? We'll just leave it at East Coast. And I had a friend call me that was out of town, and he said, "Hey, we've got so much stuff going on up here. I need somebody to come up here and help me." So I took one of my crews myself up to Aiken, South Carolina, which nobody probably knows, but it's a beautiful little small town, great people. And we helped them clean up after the storm. And I was gone for 2 full months. And I came back, and my team was better off than they were when I left. And like I said, that's why I'm giving them so much credit, because they basically pushed me out to do something else. I came back and they said, "We don't need you." And that was when I knew it was time, because I'm just like a lot of the people that are listening, probably, like I wasn't okay with just sitting at home. So that's when I got involved with somebody did take on a minority investment after last year, and really not for the capital, but for the M&A experience. And that's when I just started getting tons of deal flow across my desk, and us looking at a lot of different things.
That's wonderful. Anything that you would share with someone thinking about buying multiple businesses?
Ooh, well, I'm brand new to this game, so maybe somebody can share something with me. But I would say, because I did work at the world's largest landscaper, and I watched them do a lot of M&A. I think that was probably the time that you and I talked, Chelsea. And I feel like I watched them do a lot of things wrong, where they just built pipeline and they closed because of a certain financial makeup, and they didn't really dive in to see if they fit with culture or how we should do the transition. So with what we're doing is we're being very selective. There's been other businesses that, if it were my old company, they would have made us buy them, and we're not buying those companies. We're making sure that the team is aligned, and just being very selective, because we don't have to, at the position we're at, we don't have to buy anybody else. We're still growing organically quite a bit. But if we find the perfect partner, specifically in some key cities that are from all over the Southeast, like, we're definitely going to continue to try to acquire others.
You guys make my heart happy. Okay, so for the sake of time, I'll kind of keep it going. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your experience. And I say all the time that I'm so blessed to be a part of you guys' journey in Slack, but like, you guys make my heart happy. I just want to share a picture of their company. So like, I know that David wanted to be there today and traffic kept him from being there, but this is his company, Third Wheel Podcast Studio. And I think the key takeaway for him is that it's really important that you buy as big as is appropriate for your skills and experiences, but is also necessary to achieve your objectives. So he spoke specifically about, like, in the beginning, needs versus wants. And so I think that's the key takeaway. I love that was actually the takeaway, because I built this last night, but apparently I know you guys a little bit. Buying more than one business with Brian Hartman. His LinkedIn is linked here. This is a picture of his company, one of the tree trucks. And so I just wanted to, make it real for you guys. But the key takeaway here, in my opinion, is start with one. You never want to jeopardize historical performance by acquiring too soon. And he did it exactly right. And again, I've been doing this for many, many years. And the cue is when the company will not suffer by you getting distracted by something else. That's when it's time to grow, right? But if it's not ready and you try to bring another company in, you'll be sacrificing historical performance by trying to grow too soon. So the last story that I'm going to share on behalf of the member who wasn't available is like figuring out if this is the right path for you. And so because they couldn't be on the call, I didn't feel comfortable sharing the company information without their consent. And so what I can share is that they really did buy a unicorn, right? In the sense of, they closed within 2 years, the business was growing really well, it was doing great, but they had never been more miserable in their experience. And they don't view this as a mistake. Like, they don't regret buying the company. They think it was the perfect first company to buy. It checked a lot of the boxes for them. But what they didn't realize, they bought a business that they came out of, like, a global environment, right? They ran a global division for a a tech company, right? So like big teams. And they didn't understand, number one, how important a team was for them. They bought a company with one key employee and then contractors, so it was very isolating. And then they didn't understand how important it was to them as a human to feel deeply connected to their work. And they bought a company that was like a commercial B2B type business. And there was just no connection to the work, right? So they ended up being very miserable in the actual experience of being a business owner. And again, they don't view it as a mistake. It checked a lot of the boxes that they had, but their takeaway was just, they think it's really important that you think about what the characteristics of the business is that you're going to thrive in. Do you need a team? Do you want a business that's more of like a family culture, right? Where, it's small and they have deep ties to the community, and I'll age myself, but like, they sponsor the Little League team, right? Really spend time. And we talk about this in the intensive a lot when it comes to defining the type of business that you want to buy, but it's like, what does that look like? Like, same thing with some of the exercises we do about how you want to spend your time. It's really important that you understand where you're going to be the happiest at, because that's the business you need to be buying, right? And some comments that people put in Slack that they wanted me to share with you guys. The first two are that I am sharing is really around how important your value as a searcher is. But it's really around the importance of understanding the value of the business to you as a human and why you should be buying it, right? And the value to you as a person might be different to someone else because they're not looking at it through the same lens. So it's really important to understand yourself, which again goes back to why I was so comfortable building the lab for Walker. Was I truly think in my heart of hearts that this is how you do it well. And then the second kind of grouping that I wanted to share was they all talked about how emotional and how much of a personal process buying a business was, and how important it is to regulate your emotions. And David brought up on when we were in the practice session, this assessment that we do around the saboteurs. But it's like there's so much emotion that people don't really talk about. And you need to be able to manage it effectively, not just yours, but others. And understanding both the seller and your perspective is just recognizing the personal side is the fastest way to get the deal done. So at the
Can
end
I
of
chime in on that real quick, Chelsea?
please, yeah.
I think that's super important. Don't you know, Brian was lucky. He put in one LOI, it got accepted. I put in a bunch, and you can't take it personally. It's not personal. The one bit of advice I'd give is when you get to the stage where you're talking to sellers, my view was always my call with a seller was 50% for me to find out if I wanted to buy the business and 50% for me to convince them I was the right person to sell the business to, whether or not I ended up putting an offer in.
Yep.
And to your point about the seller, it's very emotional for them too. A lot of them, this has been their business, their baby, and now they've got to hand it over to somebody, and they want to make sure they're handing it to a proper steward to take care of the business and their people. So yeah, emotion is huge in the whole process.
Yeah, we talk a lot about how important relationship building is and rapport building. You really want the seller to see themselves in you, and which is why I think a lot of what's flowing over on SMB Twitter and from search funds can be a little confusing for self-funded searchers. But yeah, I think so. So as we talk about like, should I buy a business? I think the things that are important for me to help you guys understand is that you should not underestimate relevant experience. So I wanted to put their backgrounds up here because I didn't realize that they both had backgrounds that were relevant to the businesses they bought, because that's not always the case. And we've had, 250, 275 closings at this point. But it does help. And what I think that, I think Brian was the one that was talking about how important it is to like actually have management experience and things like that. Like in my experience, people will say like, how do I decide if I should be buying a company? And I mentioned it briefly, right? But like you need to be able to have good communication skills, right? And that might mean that you have been a manager before, right? Like if you're going to go manage a team, you need to understand the dynamics of being a manager, right? Because it's not really fair to the business or the team that you're acquiring or even the customers for you to learn that. Because there's anyone that's been a new manager will tell you the things they did when they were first starting. And once they actually became skilled at it, are vastly different, right? And you're going to be learning those skills while protecting historical performance with potentially a personally guaranteed loan, right? Project management skills are really important. Delegation, if you can't delegate, you will not succeed. And so if that's a challenge for you, then go, do something to practice that skill. Be comfortable with hard conversations. Ideally, you'll have some experience managing budgets, have experience hiring and firing people, and ultimately knowing what to ask for help with. And so all of this stuff was actually referenced in the stories of the lab members today, which is amazing because it's not, we didn't talk beforehand, but it just emphasizes how people will ask me like, well, should I buy a business or not? I have built my entire career around taking jobs to fill skill gaps that I saw in myself. And so maybe it means you shouldn't buy a company right now if you've never led a team. Then go get a job and go learn how to do that, right? So that you can mitigate your risk. I'm not sure what happened, why buying a business became like the mortal enemy of corporate America. Like corporate America is a really great place to get paid to develop your skills. And so there's no shame in working for someone else to develop skills when those skills will serve you much better in the long run. And so these are just the things that I think about, because at the end of the day, everyone's goal here, at least probably, is to buy a business. But we always say at the lab, it's not at the we don't want you buying a business at the expense of making a mistake. because that's not where you want to be. I think that's all I got.
Well done, everyone. That was awesome. I feel like I should redo the podcast to be like a panel conversation with multiple buyers, which I've
Well, you
actually
and me,
considered
we can
before.
talk. We can talk about that. No, I'm just kidding.
One of you, maybe it was you, Brian, said it's harder now than it was as you've kind of gone back. Yeah, I guess it was you because you've gone back out and searched. Say, I mean, you can kind of compare before and after, but both of you, just what was your experience with the competitiveness of searching?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. The reason I say it's harder now than it was is because the environment's completely different. And part of the reason I had to grow when I bought the business is because I bought it at one of those fluctuating SBA interest rates at 6.5%. And it wasn't but 6 months later that my interest rate was 10.5%. So I just think that the combination of that, as well as, at least, David, I don't know what your experience is in the podcast studio world, but the private equity involvement at the home service businesses has decreased the amount of SDE, EBITDA, whatever you guys want to play with, what their minimum threshold is. That it's kind of, if you're an SBA buyer, I think it makes it harder to buy much more than a $600,000 or $700,000 SDE business currently.
Yeah, and I'd just add to that, I think also from when you bought a few years ago, Brian, my experience is much more recent. I think it has become in the past 2 or 3 years, partially because of you, Chelsea, I blame you,
I
and
you can blame
Walker,
me.
in vogue to look at buying a business. And so the competition even is huge. I mean, there were deals where I couldn't even book, I was very interested, but I couldn't even schedule a call with the seller because they're like, hey, we already have 3 LOIs and this and that and the other, and we'll let you know if something happens. So I think the competitive marketplace is huge. And one piece of advice, and I would love to take credit for this, but this one I have to give credit to Chelsea begrudgingly for, is the lab, certainly helped me present myself in a way that I know brokers took me much more seriously than all the tire kickers out there. So that, when it comes to the brokers reaching out to you and offering you deals, or even saying, oh, am I going to talk to this guy? Having all of the materials up front and my buyer's profile and my SBA pre-approval and all of that really kind of put me like, oh, okay, this is somebody serious. We want to give them the time of day. So that helped, but it's still really competitive.
Yeah, I agree with that, David. I remember I sent my 3 things that we put together in the lab over to buy this business. And at the time I sent it over and they said, great, let's meet. And I thought to myself, I said, you know what? I don't even know if I can get approved for this financing, but yeah, we'll meet. And we figured it out. But I definitely presented even more qualified than what I was because of what the lab helped us put together.
And look, it worked.
That's
Yay.
right.
Thank you, guys. So earlier on, we heard about autonomy being something that really an emotion that really the desire for autonomy being an emotion that really drives people to go down this path. But we also heard how much work it is, of course, to be a business owner, especially if you're coming from W-2 land. The transition from the buck not stopping with you to the buck stopping with you can take some adjustment. And it probably means you're going to work harder or more hours than before, maybe not. So I guess maybe for people with families, and Chelsea, you mentioned wanting to spend more time with kids, people with families who are in W-2s but contemplating this path, what would you tell them? Because, and let's assume that buying a business means you're going to work harder, not less hard than you are in your corporate job or your W-2. What would you tell people? How would you help people think through that?
Yeah, I'll start on that one. I think the biggest difference is you're dictating the schedule, right? You're the one deciding what the priorities are and whether or not you're going to do something. Now, ultimately, it affects you directly, so you make your priorities based upon that. But if you want to go travel to your daughter's traveling softball team for the weekend, and that's a priority, and you need to take Friday off, you don't have to go to your manager and say, hey, I need to take Friday off. They go, well, we got these meetings. You can't. You just do it. So I think you do work harder. You're working probably longer hours, but again, it's your schedule and it's ultimately for your benefit.
Yeah, my response is going to be from somebody who has 3 kids, 6 and under. So when I bought the business, my wife was 6 months pregnant, and that's why I only could afford to submit 1 LOI, because I knew it was now or never. But I would say that, and this is from me, not just me, but other people that I know, that people that make family a priority are going to always make family a priority. And you do work harder. The work doesn't seem as much like work because each amount of effort you put in reaps a bigger reward. So you definitely work harder. But I've just seen that the people that I know that were already people that were grinding 20 hours a week or 20 hours a day continue to do that. And then the people that always made family a priority continue to make family a priority. And maybe we sacrifice a little bit of extra money. But one thing that you do when you do prioritize that is it makes you build a team that can function without you. And that's a super valuable skill to have.
Yeah. And one more point to that, when I used to be at a Fortune 100 company in tech, and people would come on board, and I'd say to them, look, you could easily work 60 to 70 hours a week here. There's enough work, but don't. You're going to burn out, and it's not going to move the needle. The difference for Brian and me is if we work 60 or 70 hours a week, we are moving the needle, and we're moving our needle. And that's fundamentally, I think, what makes it enjoyable and makes it doesn't feel like work to me, quite honestly, because I enjoy what I'm doing and enjoy it.
And I think it gets the spirit of ownership. And, I can vouch for all of those emotions, even though I didn't buy my business. I mean, I am absolutely stretched thin between family and acquiring minds, just no room to breathe. But they're both amazing things to be spending my time on. So it's just awesome. And I'll also say, just on your point about learning to delegate or figuring out a way to carve out more time for yourself, it really up levels you. Chelsea, you said that you spend a lot of your career always looking for opportunities where you could plug skill holes that you had. This is gonna certainly cause you to being an owner causes you to stretch, causes you to up level. So it's also just a great way to it's a forcing function to, kind of be your best professional self and be your best optimizer of time because you'll never have enough of it.
So can I share two things? Because I think it's just important. The first thing is I work insane hours, right? Insane. Because the lab's my baby, right? We have almost 1,000 members. I think I'm looking at 40 deals right now. I have never been happier when I'm doing that, right? On the flip side, when we're just moving into year 6 of having the lab. And early on, both my kids are 7 and 11. So they were, grew up with the business basically being built, right? And early on, my oldest, when people would say, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? The little signs in school, they would always say chemist, which is what my husband is. And this year is the first year that on both of my kids' back to school signs, when it said, what do you want to be when you grow up? My oldest said, I want to run my mommy's company. And my youngest said, I want to work for my brother in my mommy's company.
Wow.
And it was such a moment
awesome.
of pride because early on when I asked my son, don't you want to be an entrepreneur like mommy? And he's like, no, it seems like a burden because like they see it, right? They see that I'm always working. But I will say, you get to draw the lines. Like the lab members know, like I don't travel anymore, right? I stopped traveling last year because I don't want to, it's the same reason I left corporate America. I am not willing to trade bedtimes, right? Because I have a limited number of bedtimes. I don't care who I'm trading them for, they're not worth it. And as a business owner, you get to dictate, you get to set boundaries and set values, not just for yourself, but also build a culture that allows your employees to do the same thing. And I just think it's beautiful because I think there's a pivot happening where our families are being valued more, and it just makes my heart happy for our kids.
A questioner says, my plan is to use a holding company to make acquisitions, install CEOs, and then I'll serve as non-executive director. Is this viable? Brian, obviously, this is more directly relevant to your story, but David also would like you to answer just you're very much in the business now, but do you envision that sort of future where you're stepping out and either making other acquisitions or just stepping out and doing something else with your time? Somebody else is running the business for you. Brian, why don't you go first?
Well, I'm going to be the most simple person that's ever been on your show. I never called this a holdco, thought it was going to be a holdco, never used the word roll up before. I just saw something that I was good at. So I hope that I could answer that question better. But the whole dream of finding CEOs to plug and place, it just adds one more piece of complexity to that deal because you're not that person. And based off the question, it sounds like that the guy who wants to, work 3 hours a week but make $17 million, and there's a few people that can do that, but there's not many. If he's one of them, please submit an application. So, I don't really have a great way to answer the question because I'm just constant. All I'm doing is the same thing I've done before, and the other thing I'm doing is doing it while listening to stories of people on your podcast, reading books, listening to stories of other lab members. So it's I never envisioned that this was going to be where we went. It's just kind of where it took me. It wasn't intentional. I thought I was going to buy a tree company in Atlanta and I'd work here until I retired, and it's just kind of took off.
But Brian, one thing of your story that really struck me, because it's so counter to the many, many, many that I've heard that are similar businesses as yours, tradesy businesses. Your team, you were gone for 2 months. Things went better. And your team was like, dude, don't come back. Go spend your time doing something else. That is not what we usually hear in a trades business, which typically, reputationally requires a ton of people management. What was the story there?
So after we grew that first year so much, I went out and did something that I thought I did wrong to begin with, but I hired a few key high-level people that I knew of to work here. And by the time that I went away, they were all the way trained up. So it was always my goal. I've always had teams that were like that through my whole career. And it was my goal to have that team be one that worked for me at my company, and we finally got it. So, but the answer is, when I told people how much I hired my director of administration for and the bonus incentives she gets, they thought I was crazy. But I knew what she had done at another company, and I knew her personally, and I'd say pay up for the right people, and they'll give you your time back, and you can use it for whatever you choose, whether it be family, whether it be running a different part of your business, or buying another one.
And Brian, what are the key roles, the key management roles at your business that allow you that are above the crews, that are really running the business?
Above the crews are production managers, and then our director of administration. So we have 5 sales arborists on staff too that take a lot of ownership, so that helps. They're here every morning guiding people through what they got to do, but really the 2 production managers and director of admin is what I refer to as our best production team, and that's who we rely on.
Thank you. David, weigh in on this dream of buying a lot of companies and installing operators. Could you eventually do that, at least in the one business you've bought?
Yeah, definitely. And to be frank, the previous owners, there was 2 owners, they were, between the 2 of them, maybe working 10 hours a week. And it was really on autopilot. And that's, coming in, I've heard that from a lot of customers, and that's why I'm changing. That's why I'm very hands-on now, because I'm trying to put some things in place to take it to the next level. But certainly figure 6-8 months, I'll be able to step way back. And at that point, maybe acquisition, maybe growth through new studios and new cities, and even the F word, have been thinking about that. The franchise word might be something to look at as well. And so look for a Third Wheel Podcast franchise coming your way sometime, perhaps. But definitely, there's a growth strategy there for sure. They're looking at Miami, Austin, maybe Nashville, additional cities that would make sense to have the studios.
Well, Chelsea and I generally try to dissuade kind of these fantasies of holdco and installing operators, but both of you guys have actually said, this feels possible. I mean, you've already done it, Brian, and David, you're on track to do it. So,
but because I agree with their answers in the sense of like, it is possible over time. It's this mindset of like, I'm going to buy a company, put an operator in place, and then move to the next one like tomorrow. It's like, no, bro,
exactly.
Take a breath, start with one. But
such an important point. Yes.
Right. It's like you can do everyone's goal, period, whether you start up or buy, is to not have to be the one to operate it all the time. Right. And so it's totally feasible as long as you have the skills that we discussed at the end, right? That you're able to delegate, that you're able to manage well, so that when you go on, like, my big lesson with the lab was when my dad had a stroke and I just up and disappeared, and lab members stepped in and took my calls, and it all went really well. And it was like, hey, holy shit, like this is a real business. Look at us go. Right. It's like, it's possible, but not if you're just going to go in and buy a company and try to put somebody in place. That's the most asinine thing I've ever heard of. I feel like the people saying you're going to do that don't understand hiring. Like you wouldn't
It's
even
like
have.
private equity then, really, which you're
Mhm.
looking at. And yeah,
Well, it's
exactly.
not even private equity. It's actually even worse because private equity, they have a team in place that they know, that they trust, that they know they can put in place. No, this is a LinkedIn ad. Like they're just going to go hire an operator. And it's like, what are you hiring for? Please walk me through the competencies of this business you've never owned that the person needs to have, right? Like, please tell me who's training that person. I had this conversation with a prospect who did not get invited to join because he was a jerk. But it's like when I said, well, who's going to train him? And he goes, the seller. I'm like, oh, that sounds brilliant.
And that's a really great point is you don't know what you don't know walking in the door. I'm sure, Brian,
Yeah.
you had that too. And if you think, oh, I'm going to walk in week one, hire somebody to operate it, it's going to take you 6, 8 months to figure out even what those skills are to bring somebody in to do that. And then you'll be ready to do it, perhaps.
And then
Yeah.
you move on to the next field.
And that, by the way, is a playbook pattern I've seen over and over and over, is that the person is not in all hot and bothered to go do their second acquisition. They spend a good year, 2, 3 in the business, learn it cold, learn it inside and out. They're then better. They know people. They're better positioned to go recruit an operator, to train that operator, to identify what is needed from a good operator, and then they're much better positioned. So it's so good, Chelsea. It's not that it can't be done. It's be
How it's done.
patient, and it's the timing of doing it, and being
It's a
patient,
long-term goal.
being willing to work in the business for at least a couple years to earn your dues. Really.
Yes. You can't buy a business and just put somebody in place and lie on the beach and print money. It doesn't work. I promise. It's just not how it works.
Not in
And
the
if it
beginning.
does, it's illegal.
Well, thank you all for a great panel. Chelsea, what a good idea. Like I said, you got my gears turning on similar ones. So David and Brian, you guys aren't used to doing this. You did great jobs up here
Great.
on
Thank you,
stage.
guys.
Really fun. Really great insights. Chelsea, great moderation, great idea. Thank you all for participating. Thank you, audience, for coming, for your attention. And this concludes the webinar. Bye-bye.
Bye.